Hi, Jerry Smith here with another exciting gardening episode. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is garden soil. And that might not sound super exciting for most people, but soil is like the building block for everything that we do in the garden. If your soil's not right, then your garden's not going to be right. So it's a super important element you want to get right. And we're going to talk about that here coming up next. So when I'm thinking about garden soil, I think about two main things. The first being things that give your plants nutrients. So this could be quite a number of things. For conventional farmers, these are fertilizers. For more organic gardeners, we're talking about compost, we're talking about manures, we're talking about different meals like alfalfa meal, soybean meal, so on and so forth, fish fertilizers, you name it. This is the stuff that gives your plants the nutrients they need to grow, to flower, and to create fruits or vegetation or whatever it is that you're trying to grow there. Okay, and for me, I try to use a feeding regimen that resembles what nature does. And in nature, what you find most often is that plants tend to feed themselves. Okay, so plants are feeding other plants. So when you're walking around in the woods, just kind of just humor me for a second. Imagine you're walking through the woods, and beneath you, there's a bunch of leaves, there's a bunch of sticks, there's a bunch of dead weeds, vegetation, probably stepping on bugs and things like that. What you're probably not stepping on a ton of is poop. Right? All right, now I understand it's out there, right? There's deers out there, there's other rodents and squirrels and mice and things like that. They go out there and they leave their excrement, but you're not stepping on that all the time. It's not like with every step you're stepping on someone's poo, right? Okay. With every step you probably are stepping on some vegetation, though. You're probably stepping on some sticks. You're stepping on other plant-based organic matter that adds to the soil. And this is what you want to put in your garden. Okay. I'm not saying that manures are terrible. Okay, but the way that we use manures in our home gardens does not at all reflect what's going on in nature. In nature, like 90% of the soil that's out there is all made from other plants. Okay, in the fall, leaves fall down, they decompose, and they add to that topsoil, they add to that organic layer of the soil. So, in my garden, I try to do the exact same thing. I try to use nutrients that are all plant-based. So I use a compost that is all plant-based. The stuff that I buy is called Eco Scraps. Okay, you can find it at Walmart or a lot of your other big box like stores, and it's all made from pretty much food waste. Okay, that's their big thing. They try to get a bunch of food waste, fruits, vegetables, things from restaurants and that sort of thing, and they compost it with coconut coir, which is something I also like. I'll talk about that here in a second when we talk about the other part of our soil. And they make a really nice black nutritive compost, and that's what I've grown everything in my garden with. So you don't need to have manures in order to have really good soil, and you don't have to use anything animal based in order to do that either. Okay, you don't have to use blood meals, bone meals, and that sort of thing. You don't have to use like fish bone meals or anything like that. Just use plant-based stuff, and your garden will thrive just based on that. So the first thing I talked about was the nutritive stuff that you add to your soil. Now let's talk about the second part of the soil, which is the stuff that gives your soil texture and gives it allows it to retain moisture and that sort of thing. So these types of items would be like your peat moss, which is what most people use. Coconut coir is a good alternative, and that's what I like to use because I think it's more sustainable. These are things like, what's another one? Perlite's one of them, vermiculite, sand, anything that's not really organic, okay, but gives your soil the right texture and the right drainage and that sort of thing for it, okay. So those are the two different parts of the soil. You're probably wondering like how to mix them and what ratios and that sort of thing. The Mel Bartholomew approach to gardening, the square foot gardening soil that's often used is a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix. So this is 1/3 compost, okay, a varied compost. I should specify because he talks about using a fungally dominated compost and bacterial dominated compost, compost from like wood chips as opposed to like from food scraps and that sort of thing. He talks about all different types of different compost. So use a third of whatever compost you come up with, okay, a third with either peat moss or coconut coir, doesn't matter which one you use, and then a third of either perlite or vermiculite. And I should tell you that I like the vermiculite better. Mel Bartholomew likes the vermiculite a lot better. I think it's a better texture to it. Doesn't break down as easily as the perlite does, but perlite's cool too. All right, nothing wrong with it. I used it for years actually, and had no issues with this. I like perlite too. So 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix of that will actually be a really great raised bed mix for pretty much any garden. Here's the problem with that mix: it's super expensive. Okay, especially that last part I was talking about, the vermiculite. Around here, like $50 for one of those big bags, okay, and that doesn't hardly fill anything up. So, and compost obviously is not very cheap unless you're making it yourself, okay, and that sort of thing. So it's an expensive mix to get into. So I just kind of eyeball things. And one thing I didn't talk about is that I added to my soil is topsoil. If your local topsoil is really good, add a bunch of it and get that going. But around here it's a clay-based soil, so I used a little bit of it, but I didn't use a lot of it. And I'm trying to fill these raised beds, right? You don't want to be doing that all with that expensive potting mix. So use some topsoil if you need to. But in general, you want a certain texture in your soil, okay? So don't worry about the ratio so much. I'm going to show you what your soil should look like and what kind of texture it should have. Okay, hopefully this thing stays focused for you. But here I've got a bag full of soil that I used from last year, and it's exactly the same mix I was telling you about: a 1/3 perlite, vermiculite, 1/3 of coconut coir, and 1/3 compost is what's in here. You can tell it's a nice, light, fluffy mix. Okay, if I squeeze this, which I'm going to do right now, notice it clumps together pretty easily. Okay, so it clumps up well, but if I take my finger, I can break it apart really easily. So that means that the roots will be able to find their way through the soil really easily to get the air that they need, to get the water that they need, and find nutrients that they need. So that's pretty much the texture that you're wanting, this crumbly sort of texture that when it's moistened, and this is wet, I should mention that, okay, this is wet because it's been raining out here for a couple days, but that's perfect. When it's squeezed gently, should retain its shape, and when pressed gently, should break apart and should crumble apart very easily. Notice how fine of a mix that is. There isn't a whole bunch of like sticks and big rocks and all that stuff in there. Plants don't need all that. Okay, doesn't hurt them, but just give them the stuff they really want, which is really good soil. So that's what your soil should look like, regardless of what you mix with it. Okay. All right, so I already talked about manure a little bit, and that it's not necessarily the most natural way to deliver nutrients to plants. I mean, plants do a better job of feeding themselves, plants feeding plants sort of thing. But here's the other problem I have with manure, specifically, just in general, okay, and in this sort of world that we live in. A lot of the meat products produced today are produced with antibiotics and with hormones and with a bunch of other stuff that's added to them. And when you get the manure from those animals, you're also getting some of those antibiotics, some of those hormones, and everything else that comes with that. Additionally, a lot of those animals are being fed a conventional diet that is conventional feed with a bunch of pesticides and stuff in it. We're not talking about organic feed here. I mean, we're not feeding. Not everyone's feeding their beef and their pigs and their chickens with organic feed. A lot of them are using conventional stuff that's got a bunch of pesticides, a bunch of petrochemicals in it, and again, they're giving them those antibiotics and those hormones to help them stay healthy, because they're feeding them a diet that's not really consistent with good health for the animal to begin with. So you're getting a product that is, first of all, a waste stream product. Okay, that's really what it is. Okay, let's call it what it is. The waste stream product. And they're pushing this off on us, the consumers, and making an extra buck on what is a bogus garbage product. okay? Will it make your plants grow? Yes, but at what cost, okay? All that stuff is ending up in your soil, which is going to end up in your plants. And if you're eating it, guess what? It's in you now, okay? So whatever those animals are eating, and whatever medicines they're being given, whatever treatments they're given, that's going straight into you, which is another reason that I'm just not a fan of manures unless you know exactly where the source is coming from. Now, if you know who the farmer is, and you know what they're feeding them, you know that it's antibiotic free, and you know they're getting food that is consistent with good health for that animal, like, you know, grass fed for cows, free range for chickens, or eating worms and stuff out of the yard. If that's the type of manures, if that's the sources you're getting your manures from, then great, keep on doing it. Okay, those are really great fertilizers and great ways for you not waste what's already on your land, right? If you're already taking care of those types of animals and stuff, then by all means use the manure. But for regular old folks like me who don't own animals like that and who don't know farmers, and I could get to know some farmers in the area and learn that, but it's just not a safe or practical means of getting nutrients to your plants. So there's my rant on manures. Feel free to disagree with me and comment on it. I will be more than happy to have a good, intelligent conversation regarding the matter. But for me, I don't want poop in my garden. No poop here. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please hit the like button right now and subscribe to see more videos of me showing you guys how to garden with less money, less effort, more productivity. All right, talk to you later.